good afternoon, everyone. This is Pam Scott with Oasis Solutions, and also Jody Patterson is on the call. That's going to be helping facilitate the meeting today. Jody, would you like to start with some of the housekeeping?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I just had to unmute myself there for a moment. Thanks everyone for joining us. Good afternoon. Pam Scott is going to be covering inventory management tips and tricks and inventory physical count, I believe. We do encourage questions during the webinar, and I will be monitoring those in the Q&A window. So if you do have a question as we go along, please pop those into the Q&A window, and Pam will occasionally pause for us to read those out and answer them live as we go along. If for some reason we're unable to answer the question during the webinar, we will take down the person's name who asked the question and follow up with you offline to get those questions addressed. We will also be sending out a recording of this webinar following the presentation today. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Pam.
Thank you, Jody, and welcome everyone. Today we're going to focus specifically on the physical count process. We're quickly approaching the end of the year, and some of you may do a physical count on a monthly basis or quarterly basis. A lot of people just do it at the end of the year. And so I thought this might be a good time to get everyone prepared and go through the process. So today we are going to focus on kind of the manual process of doing a physical count. We're not going to get into any scanning or anything like that, but specifically the manual entry with the physical count. So today I'm going to kind of walk through those steps, and inventory, how people use inventory can greatly vary. So if anyone would like a printout of kind of the steps that I'm going to go through today, you can just send me an email after the presentation, and I'll be glad to forward you that document. Also, I will be, as Jody said, fielding questions. Some of these answers can get quite lengthy depending on the situation related to inventory. So some of those maybe would be better served taking offline or following up with some written documentation on the process. So I'd like to go ahead and get started talking about inventory. So the first thing that I want to talk about is before you do a physical count, especially if you're just doing it at the end of the year, stop and think about if the people that are doing the physical count and working in Sage 100 have ever been through that process before. Because there are some things that you could accidentally do during this physical count that would literally zero out your inventory. So you want to make sure that you are avoiding those types of situations, and we're going to talk about those today. So the number one thing I'm going to tell you is before you start a physical count process, please make sure you have a good backup of your inventory. Just make sure you have a good backup of everything in Sage before you actually start the process. So the steps to doing and getting ready to do your physical count is in the inventory management module. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to go into period end, and you're going to go into the negative tier report. And what you're going to want to do, if you're using LIFO and FIFO as evaluation on any of your items, you want to go in and run this report to see if you have any negative cost tiers. So I do not have any in this example, but you are going to basically go to period end, go to inventory negative tier report. You can do it by specific product lines or a specific warehouse, but you do need to make sure that how you're running this report, you eventually cover all of your product lines and or all of your warehouses. So you're going to go in, you're going to print out this report, It's going to show you any negative tiers that are in your inventory. And then what you're going to do, if there are negative tiers, the next step is that you're going to go into your negative tier adjustment. You're going to want to make sure that you're reflecting the correct period. And then you're going to basically print and then update this tier adjustment. So again, I don't have any negative tiers in my inventory, but you do want to go and make sure that you get those negative tiers taken care of before you actually move forward with that physical count. If anyone would like more detailed information on LIFO and FIFO valuation or managing negative tiers, that's something that you can follow up after the presentation with an email to me at pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to provide you with that documentation. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take care of your negative tiers. Then, if you're using the sales order or purchase order module, you are going to want to make sure that any entries that you have in sales order or PO are updated. So if you have in purchase order a receipt of goods, or you're in the process of doing a receipt of goods, or you're in the process of doing a return of goods, you're going to want to make sure that you have those updated so that they are reflected in your inventory. The same with sales order. If you have sales order invoices or credit memos or debit memos, anything of that nature out there, you also want to make sure that you have updated all of those prior to beginning the physical count process. Okay, so after you make sure that you've taken care of any negative tiers, you've updated any outstanding transactions in the sales order and purchase order, and also, if you don't use sales order and or purchase order, and you actually make the entries directly in the inventory module using the transaction entry, you also want to make sure that all of those transaction entries have also been updated. So any transaction basically that will affect your inventory, you want to make sure that those have been updated. You want to update your transaction, daily transaction register as well. Get everything posted before you actually start preparing for that physical count. Now, what you're going to want to do next is, now I'm going to ask this question, and I believe you can either put the information in a chat or you can raise your hand and Jody can see it. There's two different ways that you can do that physical count. You can do your physical count entry, or you can, which is listed here, which is probably what most everyone does. But Sage also now supports card count entry. So I'm going to focus on the physical count entry today. If you do use card counts, if you will put in the chat or raise your hand, and so that we'll know if anyone does use that feature, so that I can touch on that for you as well. So what you want to do first, after everything has been updated, is you want to go into your physical count worksheet. And again, you can determine if you're wanting to do this if you have multiple warehouses and it's just one particular warehouse location that is going to be counted. You can make your selection for just a particular warehouse. You can do for a particular, item codes, which you're probably not going to do it that way. If you use bins, you can do it by bin location. You can do it by inventory cycle. You could do it by product line. Most people either do all or they pick a particular warehouse. So what you want to do is you have several options. And when you are ready to physically start doing the count, what you want to do is you want to print the worksheet and you want to freeze your inventory items. So you're going to make this selection, and then you're going to print the worksheet. I'm going to do a preview so that you can see what it looks like. So you saw how that little bar went across. Basically what that's doing is freezing my inventory. And now what it has done is this is my, my worksheet. So it breaks it down by inventory item. Now this is a serialized item, so it's showing every serial number that I show in my inventory. And so whoever's doing inventory is going to take this piece of paper, go out, look at these motherboards, and say, yes, we have one of this one of this one, and they're basically going to fill out this count sheet. So again, you can see that we have other items that are not serialized, so you're just going to put in a quantity there. And again, here are more serialized items. But this is going to break down your entire inventory based on your selection. So you may, have these printed by item number, you may have them printed by location, and give them to different folks in the inventory for them to do their count. So while your inventory is frozen, your normal operations can resume as far as anything related to purchase order or sales order or any inventory transactions. So it doesn't mean that you have to stop business while you're taking this count. Because you have frozen those items, you continue processing. Once you enter your physical count in and you are updating things, it's also going to then take into consideration everything that has been received while it was frozen or anything that was sold, if that makes sense. So you're going to go through and do this count. And then after the count is complete, that is where you're going to go in. You've got your sheets, and you're going to put in your physical count entry. So when you go into physical count entry, it's going to ask you what warehouse that you want to do, and I'll just grab one here and click accept. Okay, so it's basically bringing up all of the items that were frozen, and it's basically in the order of those physical count worksheets. So you'll notice, remember that first item was a serialized item. It's going to list all of those items. Inventory currently thinks I have one on hand, and if I counted one, I'm just going to put that entry in there. You have to put some type of a number in this field. If the item, the quantity is 1 and they counted 1, you can't just go, okay, well, that quantity is correct. I'm just going to leave this blank and move down and only enter items that have a different amount. Because when you update this physical count entry, what it's literally going to do for anything that has 0 is it's going to change your on-hand quantity from 1 to 0. So you always need to be filling in a number. So for instance, in this area, if there's 153 items instead of 154, you're going to type in the number that was counted. So again, your serialized items are individual, and then things that are FIFO or LIFO or standard are going to be, or average cost, are going to be listed in just a generic quantity. So once you have all of these counted, you can actually then print out this physical count entry so that you can double check it before you update it. If for any reason you realize that, you know what, we froze the inventory too quickly and we shouldn't have done that, and you've started this process, don't go any further and accept things and update it, because if you do, every item on here other than the one that I entered this amount on is going to zero out, and it's basically going to wipe out your inventory count. and then you're going to have to update your general ledger, and then you're going to have this humongous number in your system. So if you realize that you froze the inventory and you didn't mean to, something came up and you're not going to do the inventory this weekend, then just cancel out of this. And what you want to do is go back into your physical count worksheet, making the same criteria selection, and you're going to select clear frozen items. I'm just going to preview that. So basically, my inventory that was frozen, it has now cleared the freeze on that. I can do whatever I need to do. I can wait till next weekend, and then you're going to start that process all over again. So I will tell you that every year we will have at least one client call that started something with a physical count, or maybe it was someone that was brand new with a physical count and kind of got started in the process and accidentally updated without putting any quantities in, and it literally zeroed their inventory out. So that's why it's important to make sure that you have a good backup. So I'm going to just open for just a second and see if anyone has any questions on what we've talked about so far.
Yes, Pam, we do have one question. Is there any issue with freezing today and finishing inventory 2 days later?
Good, very good question. And no, there is not any issue with that, because that could be very realistic depending on how big your warehouse or your inventory is. That's why you basically go through that freeze process, and then normal operations can continue, because it will take anything that you have done into account once you complete this whole process. So yes, it's, maybe you know that you're going to do inventory on Saturday, and at the end of the day, Friday, is when you make sure everything is updated. You go ahead and freeze your inventory, print out your worksheets so that your staff has them when they're ready to go Saturday. Maybe that takes them 2 days, and you don't actually get to enter that count until Monday. So yes, that is perfectly fine. I would not recommend dragging it out over 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know that would cause a major problem, but you probably would want to just, get it taken care of and get it entered and be finished with it. But yes, over a couple of days is no problem, and that's probably the norm for almost everyone that uses inventory.
Great. I don't see any other questions, but we do have a request to show the card count entry.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I was going to ask about that. So if you use card count, and basically in most instances, the reason card count is used is if you have items in multiple locations. And that didn't explain that correctly. If you have the same item in multiple locations in your warehouse, maybe you use bins, and you have multi-bin, and you have a bin of widgets in one corner of the warehouse, and then all the way over in the other corner of the warehouse, you have another bin of the exact same widgets. So after you have frozen your inventory, let me go back in and do that real quick. When you do a card count entry, it basically is going to pre-number your cards, just like if you were doing like a batch entry. It wants to know if you're going to do a specific warehouse. It wants to know if you want to include all the lot and serial numbers, not just LIFO and FIFO items, and the unit of measure for the count. So I'm going to click OK there. And then basically here, so your staff is going to have cards that you can either make up yourself. I know that you can purchase card inventory cards online anywhere, but you're just going to put in the card number, and then you're going to make sure the warehouse is correct. You're going to put in the item code, and I'm just going to grab one here that hopefully isn't a serial item, and I'm going to say that I counted 15 of those. And I can put a comment on this if I want to. This was in bin number 1. So then I can go and then just do my next card. What will happen is, let me just grab a couple, let me do a variation here, and we'll just pretend like we've got a whole bunch. So let's say that we get down to our 50th card and we have more of this cabin inventory item. So we're going to select that again, and which one was it? Hold on. Cabin. Here we go. And so in bin 2, we have 25 of these, and I can put in bin number 2 if I want to make a comment here. After you do your card count, and again, you can print this out and so that you can double check your cards and make sure the count is correct. By printing this report, then you're going to update it. And what the system will do is it will combine like items. So if you looked at inventory, if we froze our inventory and looked at what we had on hand, and it said that we had 40 of this cabin item, I can have multiple card entries, and it's going to combine that and say, okay, of this item, the inventory shows we have 40 and we counted 40. So that's the difference between the card count and just doing the physical entry count. And I honestly do not remember at what version level card count was added to inventory. But if that's something that you're not seeing on your system, just let us know and we can figure that out for you. So anyway, that basically is what the card count entry does. And again, it's for typically if you have items that are in multiple bins or multiple places within your warehouse, so that you can have basically have a count, you know, for each bin, have a card. You know, I don't know anyone that manually tracks their inventory anymore in addition to using an automated system. You know, but back in the day, you may have had inventory cards where you actually tracked, you know, what was sold, what was received, and you kind of kept a running count. But I don't think anyone does that anymore. So are there any questions about this?
No questions right now.
Okay, all right. So after you have entered your physical count, and so I'm going to go in, and again, I'm going to just do a couple of items here, just so that you can see what happens if I do it incorrectly. So we're going to say each of these serial items I have one of. And so then I get confused and I go down and I go, well, let's see, you know, all of these, say 1, but I'm going to go down to this item and say, yes, I have 64 here. And unfortunately, I've left all of these at 0. When I click accept, when I'm finished with my count, I'm going to go into the physical count variance register. And preview it. And I'm going to just say sort by item code. I could do it by warehouse if I wanted to. So this report is showing me what my quantity on hand is, the quantity that I counted, any over or short, and the variance amount. So you'll notice on these non-inventory items, you know, because I skipped this line, it thought I had 154 on hand. I didn't enter any, so it assumes it's going to take 154 out. and it's going to have a variance on my inventory of $84,000. So when you get down to the end of this report, it's going to show you what the impact is on that physical count. And at that point, if you realize, oh my gosh, whoever was doing the data entry didn't do it properly, when you exit out of here, it's going to say, do you want to update this? Say no. And then you can go back into your physical count entry and you can correct those items. So, and you want to look at that anyway, because maybe you just made a typo. Maybe it thinks you had 154, you transposed the numbers and said you had 145, and you go back and look at the actual page, and then you notice that you had just miskeyed it. So do not update it. If you update it, it's too late. Then the only option you're going to have to fix it is to rekey everything or do a restore, and then go down and find that line item where you had that number. Let me see if I can find where I did it, and then just change it. So if this was actually 63, I can go in and change that. So everything can be fixed until you actually update the physical count register. Once that happens, then that's it. So with that being said, and like I said, because I know that we have calls each year where somebody will call and say, I don't know what happened, but all of my inventory is zeroed out. On this physical count area, especially printing out this physical count worksheet, you might want to limit through the through role maintenance who actually has access to that, because somebody could do it very innocently, and or maybe they're going, well, I just kind of want to run through this process and make sure I understand it before I do my inventory, and they accidentally freeze it and update it with all zeros. So just be really, really careful with that, because that is not what we need to happen at year end, and we certainly do not need to add anything to the stress of 2020, that's for sure. So after you've entered your physical count and you've printed your variance register, if that variance register is okay, you are going to update it. And then at that point, it's going to be the normal process where it will pop up and ask if you want to update the daily transaction register, and you will want to do that. And then after you have updated the physical count, you are going to want to go back to period end, and this is if you're using LIFO and FIFO valuation. You want to rerun your negative tier report and see if entering changes to the inventory created any new negative tiers, and if it did, then go ahead and make that adjustment. The goal is that hopefully when you run that negative tier report, it will come up empty, which is what you're wanting. So I'm going to step back and ask if there are, if anybody has any additional questions.
I don't see any other questions right now.
Okay. All right. Well, that pretty much, I mean, we kind of went through a lot of steps there. And like I said, but that really kind of takes us through what the process is and what you need to do for your physical count entry. If you would like a kind of a one-page cheat sheet on everything that I went through and the various steps, again, just email me after this presentation at pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to forward you that information. The information isn't going to specifically talk about card count. It will focus on the physical count entry. But if you do need more specifics about card count, you can let me know that as well, and we can pull together some information for you. So I'll leave it open. That kind of really takes us through the physical count presentation today. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and add those in. I will let you know that next month, our November webinar is going to be on the order of closing your modules So as we're getting close to year end, we're going to cover the proper order in which you close all of your modules within Sage. So we'll talk about that. And then in December, we're going to focus on payroll and AP and have webinars related to 1099s as well as W-2s. So I think some more questions popped up, Jody?
Yes. Regarding the print and freeze worksheets, if we decide not to continue with the physical count entry, we would go back and clear frozen items, correct?
Yes, that is correct. If you're in the process of actually in the entry screen and doing it and try to exit out, it'll ask if you want to save the entries and you can say no. But the best thing to do is do that and then go back and you want to unfreeze. Yes.
Thank you. Next question. What would lead to the negative tier quantity and what do you do to address it and correct it?
Okay, that is a lot more than we can get into today, but I will be glad if you'll grab that person's information. I will be glad because there's various scenarios on what can make that happen as far as having negative tiers and how to go through and make determinations and correct those. And I will be glad to pass along that information. But that gets into a lot today. That would get into a lot of things today to cover trying to address all of that. And I'll make a note and then you can follow up with me on that, Jody.
Okay. That is the only other question right now. So if anybody else wants to ping Pam's brain, go ahead and type those questions into the Q&A window.
Okay. And if you'll get that person's name, I've written down that question so that I can get them some detailed information on that.
Got it.
So with that, we'll give everyone just a couple of more minutes. If there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and end for today. Each of you that attended the webinar today, you will get an email probably within 1 to 2 days that will have a link to the recording so that you can view this again if you choose to, or, feel free to share that link with any of your coworkers. And also use it if, we're talking about it mid-October. If you need a refresher at the end of the year, go ahead and do that as well. Okay. Another question?
Yes. Is it possible to pull up previous physical count variance sheets? Are those stored in paperless Office?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I do not know the answer to that, but hold on.
That is a great question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head either.
Yeah, I've never been asked that question before, so I actually have not looked. Yes.
I love learning things on the fly.
Yes, yes, I have never been. That's a great question. So yes. And also your negative tier adjustments can also be kept. Now, what you want to make sure of is that even though we said yes in your paperless Office options, on this right side, it says keep only the last PDF copy. So if you have that checked for journals and registers, then it's only going to keep that last copy of that physical count variance register and not keep a historical list of those. So I don't find that very many people only keep the last PDF, but occasionally I do run across someone that has that checked. And usually when I find out they had it checked is when a client calls and says, I don't understand why all of my documents aren't in paperless Office. And we start researching it and realize that someone had at some point accidentally checked that box when they didn't intend to. Anything else?
I don't see any other questions unless people are typing.
So we'll give it just another moment, and if nothing else pops up, we'll go ahead and end, but we'll give everybody just another minute.
We must have all experienced physical count users on the line today, because normally this webinar is like packed full of tons of questions.
Right. Or they're just avoiding thinking about physical count, which I get too. Okay, well, everyone, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to sit through the presentation. You know, if you do think of a question after we finish, feel free to send me an email, and you have my email. Jody's is jody@oasisky.com as well. Email either one of us and we will get the answer for you and get that taken care of. So
thank you so much, Pam.
Okay, thank you. And then I will follow up later with the negative tier questions, and we'll go from there. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time today.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.